Okay, so welcome to the week 3 go-to session, right? This is the third session out of 4. We do have quite a bit to cover tonight, so I'm just going to get moving. Mostly we're going to talk about this week's activity, which is peer review. That's why I have the little team success picture here, because this is all about people helping people. You get lots of feedback from me throughout the month, but what I like about this week's activity is you'll be giving each other feedback. And believe it or not, you guys notice things that I don't, so you can really tremendously help one another out. We'll talk about that. And we'll finally get into the actual public service announcements. I know I've teasingly referred to them throughout previous sessions, but today it should be hopefully a bit more interesting because we'll get into the nitty gritty details about what you're going to be working on in week 4 in terms of the final project, the actual multimedia public service announcement. So let's get rolling. So there's the query. This is just what I went over. We'll talk about peer review, the PSAs themselves. We'll leave some time for questions and answers. Okay, so let's start talking about peer review. Okay, because this is the main activity for this week. And actually, let me get away from the presentation for just a second. I sent out an announcement about this, but I'm not sure everyone saw it. If you scroll down to the week 3 activities, like I'm doing here, you'll notice this 3.3 activity, right? Peer review discussion board. It looks like 9 people have posted their essay to the board. Everybody needs to be pasting their essay to that board, okay? So if you handed in an essay on Sunday night, you need to be posting it here. If you somehow, this doesn't apply to many people, but if you got approved for an exception because you had a medical situation or something and you are handing in the essay late, it still needs to be put here as well. So if I go into the board, I'll just give a quick glimpse of what people are doing. Okay, so you can see, and you have your option. You can just copy and paste your paper in here, and don't worry too much if things like the perfect formatting of your essay doesn't carry over. We're not going to concentrate so much on that stuff. So you can copy and paste it like this student has done, or you can just provide a link to whatever cloud-based thing you're using. I can't think of a better word than thing. It looks like most people are just copy and pasting, and that's fine. That makes it convenient so you don't have to click on a link that takes you to the document, but that's fine as well. Okay, so as you can see, a lot of people have already posted their paper. If you haven't done so yet, you need to do so. By the way, can anybody confirm in the chat, is my voice breaking up when I'm scrolling like it was during the previous week's session, or is everybody hearing me okay when I'm scrolling? Okay, most people are hearing me okay. That's another reason why I'm switching the recording function this week, because the previous way was just hogging too much of the system resources. Okay, so everybody needs to post their activity there. And I'm going to get back to this in just a second about what you need to specifically do for this week. But the first step is to post your paper over on the discussion board. But let's talk about peer review in more general terms. How many people have participated in some form of peer review, either in high school or another college level English class? Usually it takes the form of being put into groups and you exchange papers. Okay, Donald has, O'Neill has. You're familiar with this, right? I mean, this is one of the things where I actually think the online format works a little bit better, because one of the problems is that when you're in a live classroom, the whole get in groups and exchange papers and either comment on your own intuitively or answer a set of questions that the instructor has given you feels a bit like busy work. And the great thing about the online structure is that you have the time to sort of complete it during the week when you feel up to it. You can read someone's essay and then come back to it later, for example. You don't have to do it within a 1-hour time frame or something. I like that. Okay, because then it doesn't feel like busy work. It doesn't feel like you're being trapped into an activity you're not that crazy about. You have the time and space to respond thoughtfully to one another's work. So I do like that. But let's talk about peer review in terms of what you expect from your classmates, okay? Because that's what we're doing this week. We're helping each other out. For instance, and you can go ahead and type in comments in the chat, like what kind of feedback is not helpful, okay? What kind of feedback makes you look like the woman in this picture making the classic facepalm gesture? Like, what are the things that, either relying on past experience or just intuitively, what are the things that aren't terribly helpful when you get feedback from one of your peers? Donald says negative comments. Okay, I'd like to know a little bit more about what that means, because negative, yeah, that's problematic, right? But if it's something constructive that maybe isn't necessarily pointing out a positive, but something that needs to be improved, um, that's not that's not necessarily terrible. Although I don't think that's what Donald was talking about. Pasha says judgmental. Okay, I think I know what that means. Especially when like one of your peers is almost bringing too much baggage to the reading of your paper, and it's natural. I have to stop myself too, because sometimes I can get caught up in what you're writing about, and I have to remind myself that this is your paper, not mine. Um, so it's easy to bring our opinions, our values, our just aesthetic tastes to bear, and we have to be careful about that. Oh, lots of good stuff. Brianna says something simple, opinions. Pasha says tone and choice of words. Yeah, we'll get into that tone. That's something I have to keep in check too. I always try to proofread my work before I click submit, but I'm not just checking for errors. I'm also checking for tone, because sometimes, not even intentionally, I read my feedback and realize, wow, I sounded a bit too frank there. I mean, sometimes I can be frank, especially if I need to communicate something that just isn't getting through. But in general, I try to avoid problems in tone. Um, okay, lots of good stuff here. Daniel says, assuming things about your writing without the other person really reading it. Yeah, okay, good. I know what that means. Um, yeah, good. Lots of things. Oh, O'Neill mentions a big one: being vague, right? Um, and that can come into play when you're being specific, or excuse me, when you're giving positive advice or constructive advice, right? If someone just says, "Oh, it looks good to me," not only is that not terribly helpful, but it's also vague, because you don't know specifically what's working well, or what's powerful about the essay. The same thing about the opposite, when you're trying to give constructive remarks and it's just vague, like, "Oh, I was confused here," but you're not really specific about what confused you. Okay, wow, good list, guys. So yeah, all that stuff can make you look like the woman in this photo. So what kind of feedback is helpful? We've kind of covered it, right? It's sort of the opposite of what we've just listed. Um, Feedback should be specific. Whether we're pointing out something that's praiseworthy or something that could be improved, we have to be very, very specific about what we're saying. We try to leave ourselves out of it as much as we can. I mean, to a certain degree, sure, we can share our opinions, and we do have to be big boys and girls here. We have to understand that maybe not all of the advice we receive we're going to necessarily agree with, but at least it can be worded in such a way that's supportive and okay tone wise. Donald asks, when's the quiz? When will the quiz questions appear? A couple of them appear throughout, and a couple of them appear at the end. So it's sort of in between here. But yeah, helpful feedback is the exact opposite of everything we've listed. It's specific. It's aware of tone. It doesn't try to bring too much of your own baggage into the feedback. You're essentially, here's the way I look at it. I always try to put myself in the writer's shoes, and I try to be the most generous reader possible. I really do. Even if you think my feedback sometimes is frank or straightforward, I really am putting myself in your shoes. Like, I'm trying to give it the best reading I can, because I think the opposite is problematic, when you come into something and just look for errors or mistakes or things that drive you crazy. That's sort of not very, very helpful. So I think that's an important thing as well, as some people have said in the chat. Constructive feedback. Okay, so here's another way to look at feedback, and I think this will help you with what you're doing this week. Actually, let me switch to what you're doing. I have the assignment sheet already open. Okay, so here are the instructions. You can find these underneath the activity itself, but you'll see the basic facts about when this is due. I've suggested due dates, like you should have your draft posted to the board by Tuesday. You should be responding to one of your classmates by Friday, and there's a short reflection, or I'll explain what that is in a second, due by Sunday. I'm not really going to be checking to see if by Friday you've done this or by Tuesday you've done this. But I also don't want everybody waiting until Sunday to post the essay to respond to someone, because then chances are there's not really much meaningful exchange going on if you're just waiting to do everything until the last second. Length, your responses to classmates should be at least 200 words, and that reflection will be 200 words also. But here's the meat of it. basically you post your essay to the board. You need to respond to at least one classmate's paper. Okay, I've changed this. I used to have it. You had to respond to two people. Um, because that's pretty standard in a lot of classes you've taken, whether it's DGL or psychology or English. Two responses is pretty standard. I've made it just one because I'd rather have you write one thorough, thoughtful, in-depth response to another person's essay. And then if you want to show off and do a second one, either because you're feeling helpful or just because it will make me smile, and and you'll probably get all of the points awarded for that category if you go above and beyond. But just one is due. Michael says 200 words is a lot. Yes and no. It's not as much as you think. Like a full page of double spaced text is around 300 words. So we're really talking about something that's 2/3 of a page long. And I don't think you'll have problems meeting that requirement at all, actually. Um, and again, you're just doing it for one student, so you don't have to worry about writing two 200-word responses to two different students. Yeah, just choose a classmate's draft. Again, choose a student who has not yet received comments. A funny thing happens where someone's paper's on the board first, and like 10 person respond to that very first essay, and then everybody below receives no feedback. So I should have like tighter rules in place. Like I should assign you someone to respond to, or I should have a protocol where you have to respond to the person who's quote unquote in front of you on the board. But I'm just leaving it to you to respond to someone who has not received feedback yet. And then you'll write a reflection. And I'll talk about more about this in a second too. And actually here, Michael, I'm less picky when it comes to the reflection about it being exactly 200 words. It's your kind of thoughtful critique of another's essay that should probably be closer to that word count. You can do it intuitively, okay? You can look at the paper and instinctually know what to target, or I have questions that you can respond to. For example, what is the thesis and the appeal for action? Okay, so if there isn't a clear thesis in place or there's no real call to action, that's probably something the writer needs to hear. Do you see the different types of appeals being used? Ethos, pathos, and logos. If you don't remember those fancy Greek terms, just do you sense that, are there facts and statistics being used? Are there other appeals being incorporated somehow? Is that call to action clear? Like, do we know what the writer's asking a specific audience to do? Think back to my video game related topic about women in representations of women in video games, right? I had a very clear call to action. I'm asking gamers to make their voices heard by writing to game publishers. So is there something that's really specific and clear in your classmate's paper? And then some broader stuff like what did the writer do well, and what suggestions do you have for the writer? Okay. Finally, you'll post a reflection to the board, and there's a little bit of conflict. Here it says 250 words. Here it says 200 words. Don't freak out. I just look at the overall quality of the response. Basically, everyone should receive feedback. Okay, once you receive feedback, you'll essentially post to the board, thanking that person and responding to that person. Okay, it's your chance to sort of not argue or fight back, but it's your chance to sort of write thoughtful comments to the person who took time out to respond to you. And you should do so somewhat in depth. You might explain, you might respond to the points that the writer made. You might agree with the points that the writer made. You might introduce new things that need to be worked on, whatever. But this is essentially your reflection, that you're responding to the person who took time to respond to you. And if no one responds to you, you'll just respond to the feedback that I have given you. But hopefully everybody gets at least a response from someone. Okay, so there's the gist of it. You'll take time to write one thoughtful response. If you're not sure what to focus on, just try answering these questions. If you answer these questions carefully, you'll easily be at 200 words. And then just make sure that you write a thoughtful response to whoever gave you feedback. That's the gist of peer review. Does that make sense? Pretty much? Okay, moving on. Pasha, I don't know if you're talking about the reflection or the initial. I mean, whoever you're responding to, you won't create a new post for. So if you go into the discussion board and you decide to respond to, for example, Eric's paper, you obviously would click on reply, and then if you receive a response from someone, you would click reply to respond to that person. So no, you wouldn't be posting to the board. The only reason why you would be posting the board as a separate brand new post is if you didn't receive a response from a classmate, but you received a response from me. Does that make sense? Yeah, I need to make these rules tighter. I need to, I need to make sure that everybody is assigned a person or something. Okay, so here's some more feedback tips. When you're responding to each other's work, I like to think of feedback as falling into two general categories. On the left here are higher order concerns. This is like the big picture stuff like thesis, content, organization. And then on the right are lower order concerns. Okay, this is the small stuff: grammar, sentence structure, proofreading style. Um, we should be spending most of our time here on the left. Okay, this is the most important stuff. After all, this is the only essay you've written for this class. And if you handed it in, you're done, right? I mean, you'll receive feedback from me, you'll receive feedback from your peers. So you're not rewriting this paper. Like the paper's done. We're going to get into an explanation in just a second about the multimedia public service announcement, which is the next thing you'll work on. But the actual written version, the textual version, is done. So what your classmate really needs is the stuff over here. They need to be told if there isn't a clear thesis in place, right? And thesis includes things like the call to action. Um, they need to hear if content feels a little bit off. Maybe the issue or the problem hasn't been explained clearly enough for you, or maybe it lacks specific support or evidence. Those kinds of things, because that sort of advice will help the person as he or she moves into the next part, which is the actual public service announcement. This stuff over here, it's not that you can't comment on it at all. That's fine, um, but it's of less importance. And the issue is sometimes students love to stay over here. They love to point out that this word has been misspelled, or you could use a comma here. And I'm not against that. Be sure to raise those tiny things if you want, but mostly we should be staying over here because this stuff is more important. Um, but I should add APA to the lower order concerns. That's something worth pointing out. APA issues. Okay, so here's some real quick feedback tips. There are 3 of them. These probably will be part of a quiz answer, so you might want to jot them down. Not sure why I'm giving you the quiz answers in advance, but okay. Feedback tip number 1: be positive. Right? We've already talked about this. Try to be supportive. Try to look at your classmates' works in the most generous terms possible. It doesn't mean that you're going to be super friendly and not raise concerns or not point out room for improvement. But if we come in with a sort of positive spirit, will be more helpful. Okay, so there's feedback tip number 1. Feedback tip number 2 of 3: be specific. Right? We've already talked about this as well. If something's working out well, specifically point out what's working well. If something needs improvement, if something about paragraph 3 confused you, try to be as specific as you can about what confused you. And I know it can be tough because sometimes you might feel you don't have the language to express things in an academic way or in a highly sophisticated way, but that's fine. You put the word things however you can, but try to be specific. And number 3, yeah, when offering criticism or suggestions for improvement, use softeners and qualifiers. Do we all know what that means? Softeners and qualifiers? Let me take a sip from my diet root beer. Root beer, by the way, greatest drink ever invented. Really. Does that make sense? Softeners and qualifiers? Yes. Right. That's why I have these little pillows here that spell out the word love. Okay. It means that we're careful how we word things. I'm always, you may not notice it, but I'm always saying to you guys in my feedback, I was a bit confused here, or this sort of feels like, or I was a little bit unclear, right? I'm putting in these little phrases like a bit, a little, I feel, typically stuff that I would leave out because it's kind of like filler, but in this case, it's filler that's helping improve tone, because you're not hearing me. You're not hearing my voice. You're not seeing my facial expression. You're just seeing my words. So if we don't put in softeners and qualifiers, it doesn't mean that we're not being sincere. It just means we're trying to soften what we're saying. Okay, moving on. Okay, now we get into the cool stuff, right? Oh, well, I thought we were getting into multimedia stuff. Okay, I'm not sure this is cool, but okay, here's quiz question number 1. Okay, what are higher order concerns versus lower order concerns? And what are those 3 tips for giving feedback? Okay, so 2-part question, which refers to the last couple slides that we've looked at. right? What's the difference between higher order concerns and lower order concerns? And what are those 3 tips that I just gave you? I'll give people a second or two to either jot that down or take a screenshot. Can't remember what comes next, if it's another quiz question or if we're moving on. Oh, okay, we're moving on. Okay, so let's get into the information about the final project, right? Which is to create an actual public service announcement. The essay is sort of laying the groundwork. You're sort of exploring the topic. You're kind of communicating what your message is going to be to a specific audience. But now it's time to actually create a public service announcement. So yes, I'm asking you to create the sorts of things we sort of see out there in the real world, because you don't see public service announcements take the form of an essay. You typically see them on television. Sometimes you hear them on the radio. We have a couple innovative twists on this that you don't see that often in the real world, but still they make the assignment kind of fun. But here's a billboard. Okay, so here's a real world example of a public service announcement. There's a clear problem or issue that's been identified: domestic violence. There's a clear message, right? Hug, don't slug, and what you can do. If your hugging is turned into slugging, we can help. Call this number. Okay, the public service announcements we're doing in this class are a bit different. They're industry related. They're not going to be this simple or spare. But in essence, the public service announcements you see all around us in the form of videos or commercials or billboards or magazine ads, okay, they do follow this same basic principle. Addresses an issue, tries to raise awareness about that issue, and sends a very concrete and targeted message to do something about that issue. Okay, so that's what you're going to do as well. And I should say, because I've said this to a couple people in my feedback, it's not that I'm trying to teach you guys how to create public service announcements, because what are the chances you'll ever need to create one in your life? Probably zero. But I do like public service announcements because it's a real world format that can be adapted to teach writing principles about finding a topic, narrowing that topic down to something concrete, doing research on that topic, being aware of audience, okay, being aware of who you're trying to reach and making decisions based on audience. All these things are sort of key to writing. So that's why I like the public service announcement format. Okay, so let's get into details about what you're specifically doing. You have different project options, and we're going to look at the project options sheet in just a second. I've put the 4 probably most popular options up here as visuals. You can create a short song or jingle. You can create an audio piece. You can create a short comic, or you can create a short film. Let's look at the official project options PDF assignment sheet for more details. By the way, this can be found under it's the week 3 overview activity. Okay, so some of you might have checked that out, some of you may have not, but that's where you're going to find this document that we're going to look at in just a second, right? The week 3 overview. So this PDF file is found under there. So let's take a look at it. I'm not going to go through every word on this page because you can read through most of this on your own, but I just want to stress the different options and kind of explain what I'm looking for. So the first choice is you can make a video, right? A short video or film. It should be about 1 to 3 minutes. So the best way to think of this is like the actual PSAs you see on television. That's a good thing to sort of imitate or follow or mimic. Oh, and there's also this incredibly useful thing. It's technically put under week 4, but you know what I'm going to do? Is I think it's set up not to be open yet. So I'm going to go ahead and open it now, because some of you might want to start taking a peek. I have this whole thing here of past student work, examples of public service announcements that have been created in the past. And because this won't open up until the 27th, what's today? The 20th. Okay, so let me set this to open on the 20th. Okay, I actually have to go into another section and do the same thing. So I'll do that once the session is over. But at least for one class, I've done it. But that'll be incredibly useful. It's under week 4, so you'll have to go and find it. But it's called PSA Examples. And so you can see examples of what past students have done. About half of these examples are from students from my class. Is it this slow for you guys too? Sometimes on the platform, you click on something and it takes seconds to load, and then if you click on the wrong thing, you have to go back, and it drives you crazy. Oh, it drives me nuts. Okay, so you have a whole list of things. So here's an example of a film, video, public service announcement. Here's another video example. Here's an example of a song that was written. I'll get to that in a second, what you have to do for the song. But look through this stuff, because here you won't be able to hear the audio, but if I click on this link here, this student uploaded it to YouTube. I'm going to skip around because you can't hear what the guy is saying, but he starts off with a short sketch that sort of illustrates the issue, and then it translates into a pretty professional looking public service announcement. Okay, I'm getting a little problem probably because I have too many things running, so YouTube isn't running very smoothly. But you can check this out on your own. Okay, but you do have past examples to look at to see what other people have done. So the video. So I just showed a tiny clip of a video. Okay, so a 1 to 3 minute piece. This option requires a written script to accompany your PSA, and there are a couple reasons for this. First of all, I like to have more writing to evaluate, so I can look at your script. Second, the script helps you because, again, not many students do this, so I'm not trying to be negative, but every so often, there will be the person who just turns on their laptop camera, starts speaking for a minute, ends the recording, and calls that a video. And that's not really a video or film. Okay. So if you have a script, that means you probably have a plan. It probably means that you've thought through your material and have shaped it for the video option. Okay. So the script encourages you to do that. And next week, in the final go-to session, I'll revisit this idea. But the biggest challenge here is that you're taking the same essential information, your topic, your message, but it's really an exercise in changing formats and selection, right? You won't be able to include everything that was on the written page. So you'll have to decide, like, what's the best, what can I take from my essay and bring it into this new format? So yeah, looking at those past student examples, just using, YouTube has 10 million public service announcements you can look at if you're looking for video examples. If you just type in public service announcement into Google, you can see visual examples of public service announcements. So again, familiarize yourself with what public service announcements kind of look like and feel like, and imitate that. The second option is an audio PSA. It's same thing, 1 to 3 minutes. It also requires a script. Music and sound effects should be used to enhance the piece. I think the best way to think of this is that you can think of the audio piece in two separate ways. One is to sort of imagine it kind of like a commercial. I know that's the wrong term because a commercial sells a product and a PSA doesn't do that. But think of the professional pieces you might hear when listening to the radio in your car. You don't hear public service announcements that often anymore, but probably you guys have heard one or two throughout your life. So that's one way to attack it, to make a really polished 1 to 2 minute piece that sort of feels like something you would hear on the radio. Or you can be innovative. People find ways to sort of create a mock radio show where there's a host and there's a person being interviewed, and it's through that interview that the issue gets raised and the message. You can pretend you're a DJ, and I don't know. You can come up with creative ways to think about it, but essentially, it's a 1 to 3 minute audio piece that is still doing the basics of what you need to do: educate about the issue, raise awareness of it, and deliver your message. The third option is to create a short comic. Okay, so this can either be hand drawn or you can use a comic generator. Something like Bitstrips or Powtoon. This option doesn't require a script just because all of the language that would be included would already be in the comic. So I have everything I need in that case. But that's an option as well. I guess the only challenge here is that comics tend to be, you should, by the way, you should be choosing whatever format you think you're most comfortable with. For example, the audio PSA is a good choice if you're not really that tech savvy, because even if you're not really that technically literate, most people can learn how to use basic recording tools and learn to add sound elements to them, like music or sound effects. So pick the format that you're most comfortable with. The comic has its own specific challenges. I like to think that comics usually rely on a story driven way to communicate topic and message. Again, you can either hand draw it or use it using a comic generator. I will say that I don't have a preference for one way or the other, but I do just sort of know from looking at so many public service announcements, because I've been teaching this course for this version of the course for almost a year. I can kind of tell when a comic generated piece is sort of not so ambitious. The comic generators, those online tools you can use like Bitstrips and Powtoon and Pixton and Go Animate, they're awesome tools. But to make them do what you truly want them to do, you sort of have to get under the hood of those programs and make them do what you want to do. Like there's nothing more dull than seeing a comic where there's just a figure standing in an empty room saying, "Hi, I'm here today to talk to you about such and such." And then the next panel, the same figure is standing there again, delivering another piece of information, and so on. That's not really taking advantage of what comics do. Um, I mean, it's not fair. I don't really judge based on whether you hand draw a comic or use an online tool. But on some level, I do recognize that there's a bit more effort involved in someone who's actually taking time to hand draw things, scan it into their laptop, using another piece of software to make it polished. Okay, so um, it's not that I'm grading entirely on how snazzy or how beautiful or how gorgeous it looks, but I do, to a certain degree, try to make a guesstimate about what sort of efforts that's put into it. That said, my number one issue for whatever format you choose is, yes, I'm looking for clarity of message and clarity of the presentation of information. Um, where did I want to go with this? Oh, I have this sort of made up term. Okay, so don't use this outside of this class because nobody will know what it means. I use this litmus test that I call the stranger test, meaning I should be able to pull any stranger off the street, right? Just accost some random individual, make them watch your 1 to 3 minute video, have them listen to your 1 to 3 minute audio piece, have them look at your comic, and that person should not be confused, right? They shouldn't stumble. They should entirely understand this is the issue. I'm being educated about this issue, and here's the clear message of what the PSA is asking a specific audience to do. Um, I mean, yes, your PSA is targeting a specific audience, but even the real world PSAs, that domestic violence billboard, that's not aimed at me, right? I'm not the intended audience, but I understand what that billboard means. I'm not lost. I'm not confused. So that's your sort of goal, is to take the same information that you've explored to now, up until now, in a largely written format, and transform it into a multimedia piece that communicates the same information effectively. If you can do that, that's what I'm most interested in. Okay, I'm not Steven Spielberg, so I'm not going to be. Yeah, I want you to produce the best project you can. Uh, but I understand that not everybody's going to be as skilled at making films as other people, etc. Okay, let me kind of get through some of these others. There's a game option. I think we might have one person with us who's actually reached out to me because she's possibly interested in this. I don't get very many people handing in the game option. Uh, Obviously, this tends to appeal to gaming students, and it's literally creating a game, like using a piece of software like RPG Maker to make a game that functions as a public service announcement. If you're interested in this option, you should speak to me and we can talk more about it, because there are certain pitfalls you need to avoid. Like I've played lots. Well, I haven't received tons of submissions, maybe a handful, but too many of them. I'm running around fighting monsters, and I'm not sure why. And it's a very challenging sort of option, because you're not so much creating a game, but you're using the game to communicate a message. If you're interested in it, reach out to me. The next option is to create a short song or jingle. Okay, so you're going to write a 2 to 5 minute song. This requires you to submit written lyrics. So that's essentially your script. This helps me, again, evaluate your writing, but it also helps me follow along if I can't hear your lyrics very well. It's easy to sort of not get lost. And there are more details here, like you can hire friends to play instruments and help out, but you should be the one composing the song, singing it, etc. The main advice I have for the song and jingle, I would say, and I'm not trying to steer people toward one option or the other, I would say that probably about 60 to 70% are in these first three categories. And then I get a few people do the game option, a few people who write songs. I love the songs, by the way. I love all the options, but maybe because I'm obsessed with music, the songs are always fun to listen to. My number one piece of advice, if anybody is, by the way, is anybody interested in doing the song who's here with us tonight? Uh, Michael asked, can we use a program like Microsoft Songsmith? I don't know that program, so you'll have to explain what that is exactly. Um, but certainly you can use software. Like I'll get into in just a second about what you need to create that's original and is your own. Um, but yeah, you can use tools to help you with these projects, obviously. Um, but for the song or jingle, the biggest piece of advice I have to give is that your lyrics need to be like 100% literal, which is sort of the opposite of how songwriters usually work, because songwriters don't typically decide to sit down and write a song that's 100% concrete. Here, it's sort of the opposite. And again, I know it's sort of flawed to keep talking about commercials because commercials sell products, but think of like jingles that are used in commercials. Like there's no confusion. You know when there's a McDonald's song or when there's, I don't know, I can't think of any other songs off the top of my head. Like you don't get lost, you don't get confused. Same thing with the PSA. Like it needs to be 100% literal. This isn't your time to show off that you're this generation's Bob Dylan or that you're a lyrical genius who's abstract. No, you have to be the opposite of that. You have to be like 100% literal. I'd say that's the biggest challenge. And because I stress it so much now, I don't see songs that suffer from that as much. But yeah, early on, lots of songs that were just sort of, like too artistic, too creative, too abstract, when they needed really to just 100% communicate an idea. What was the name of that Macklemore song? The one that was sort of, was it Real Love? Someone help me out there. No, not Thrift Shop. That's an awesome song too. But the one that had the really nice sort of inclusive message, Real Love, yeah. Like that's okay, it's not a PSA, but like you don't get lost about what the message of that song is, right? Like it's an awesome song. Or this is sort of older, but Kanye West had that song. I'm forgetting the titles of the song tonight. Diamonds of Sierra Leone, I think. It was about the diamond industry in South Africa. Okay, that's not exactly a PSA, but again, it was pretty clear about what it was about. So your song or jingle would have to kind of do the same thing. Okay, it's not going to be confusing or abstract or too artsy. It's going to be really, really literal and direct. Finally, if you don't like any of these options, you can pitch your own idea. You just have to run it by me. Usually, people who fall in this category, they might want to create a web page. Um, they might create an infographic. An infographic is kind of like what we're looking at here on the screen, right? It's a combination of creative images and text to communicate a message. So things like that, websites, infographics. I'm trying to think if there's anything else people have done. Occasionally, very occasionally, if your field is graphic design. So I don't allow music majors or film people or computer animation people. But if you're here to study graphic design, sometimes I'm open to the idea of a sort of one page piece that would appear, for example, in like a magazine that's largely image driven, although it does have some text to help to communicate a message. But I only make acceptances for people who are literally in graphic design because my guess is that they sort of know what that is and know what to do. Okay, you can read through most of this on your own. I'm just going to stress a couple important things. Remember, Full Sail has PG-13 guidelines, so we're going to refrain from profanity, ugly racial comments, sexually explicit language. Plus, think about it. Whose PSA is going to require that kind of language? Okay, but just a reminder there. You must write and produce your project yourself. Okay, and all work you need to do, it has to be created new and specifically for this class. You can use outside images, video, and audio, but only if they belong to you. And when I say belong to you, I mean you're the creator of that music file or that image. It doesn't mean that you own a Rihanna CD and think that you can use Rihanna's music. Okay, so you can only use images, video, audio that either you created or that are allowable. And we'll get into a little bit about what sort of stuff is allowable and what sort of stuff isn't. Basically, any copyrighted material is not allowable. And I'm going to scream this like as loud as I can, because few people do it anymore, but I still get shocked when I get that audio PSA or that film, and the student has decided to use, I don't know, Taylor Swift or Charlie XCX or Megan Trainor, and it's like, oh wow, awesome, I love those songs too, but I just don't want to hear them in your PSA. So no copyrighted music can appear. And this is also a Full Sail thing, okay? I mean, it's pretty universal no matter where you go to school, but Full Sail really clamps down on that. Uh, Donald says, what if I sing a song that is not mine? That's a good question. It would depend how it's being used. Yeah, you'll have to reach out to me about that maybe offline, because I'm trying to think. Copyright does allow you to sort of cover another person's song. That's why you can have 10 million videos of people just sitting in their kitchen or in their bedroom. Or I even saw one YouTube video where a girl was playing the guitar in her bathroom, right? You can appear on screen and sing other people's songs, and that's not a copyright violation. So if that's what you're kind of talking about, yeah, I don't think that's an issue. Michael's saying his hand is up. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. So go ahead, Michael.
Talking about that Microsoft Songsmith, that's a program that you sing lyrics into this program, and it adds the music to it, the beat, the rhythm.
Okay, but it's just generating those beats and rhythms sort of generically, like it's not using someone's copyrighted music.
Right.
Okay, yeah, that would be fine.
And the final project is your project. Microsoft has fixed it where the final project will be your project.
Right. Based on that description, that's okay, because even other projects, like if you use iMovie to make your film and you use the music and sound effect files that are included in that program, that's fine. Or if you use Microsoft Songsmith and it helps generate the beats for you, that's okay too. It's just my warning is more about just not touching copyrighted material.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute. I'm gonna go ahead and mute Michael. Okay, but that was a good question. Okay, so yeah, if you're concerned about any of these gray lines, just reach out to me. But basically, we're trying to avoid copyright infringement. Listen, is Taylor Swift going to come after you because she heard that your project that you submitted to English class used her music in the background? No. Probably not, but we're trying to introduce basically professionalism principles. Most of you are headed into careers where copyright issues are going to be important, right? You're not going to just be able to create videos or podcasts or songs that use other people's creative projects without giving credit. Okay, this is standard. Watch the news sometime. You watch sports, watch the end of any ESPN sports broadcast. There's always a thing at the end that says video courtesy of, right? They had to get permission to use the video that you're watching. So this is pretty industry wide, where you won't just be able to pick and choose images that you didn't create, music that you didn't create, unless you specifically have permission to do so. That's what we're reinforcing, not that literally someone's going to come after you. Okay, and actually, this satisfies Michael's questions. Do not use riffs, beats, or samples that you do not own unless you have express permission from the source. And if you're using software like a Microsoft piece of software that includes rhythms or sounds as part of its sound bank, that's sort of already implicit permission. For example, I've created some short videos using iMovie, and they have all these cool sounds. Like you can use sounds of crickets chirping or people applauding, or their basic music tracks you can use in the background. That's all fine. Okay, that's implicit permission. But yeah, we're not just going to go and grab stuff that's not copyright allowable. Okay, so let me get back to the presentation. But yeah, I want to stress, here's quiz question number 2. Well, I'll read the question. I'll get back to what I was going to say. Quiz question 2, real easy. Just tell me what format you're going to use for your public service announcement. Okay, so tell me if you're going to choose the video option, the audio option, the comic option, the song option, or if you're going to pitch your own idea. It'd be nice if you send me a message about what you're thinking about if you're not choosing one of the available options. Okay, so really easy question. I was going to say though, that again, whatever format you choose, I'm most interested in clarity of message and how well it works. Like again, literally, I pretend I'm a stranger who's never. I don't know who you are. I don't know what school you attend. I'm just going to sit down and watch your video. I'm just going to listen to your song. If it makes sense to me and I think it feels like it's educated me about an issue and delivered a clear message, great. That's what I'm interested in. I'm not Adam Levine from The Voice, so I'm not going to. Although I do get mistaken for him often because we both look incredibly alike. But I'm not going to listen to your song and critique it like, "Wow, you were a little bit off pitch there," or or the hook could be stronger. Yeah, I don't care about that. I mean, it's awesome when I hear songs that I kind of like, but that's not my job. I'm not Steven Spielberg. I'm not a professional artist. So you just have to create the best project that you can create. Okay, and if you're doing that and everything's the message seems to be clear and all that, yeah, you'll probably do pretty well. So those are my guidelines. Okay, so next. Oh, just a reminder: pathos, logos, ethos, those fancy Greek terms that you probably never want to hear again. Just remember they do play a role here. So, what are you going to do for your video? Is it going to, I mean, hopefully it's using a mixture of different appeals. You don't have to necessarily include all three or include all three equally, but does your topic lend well to an emotional impact? Or does it lend itself well to sort of hard facts and statistics? So think about those things that we've already discussed, okay? Because they're really going to play a role when it comes time to deciding how you're going to put together your PSA. And you do have a lot of options. And I'm sorry if I don't have like a framework to give you about how to create a PSA. It's sort of I'm leaving it in your hands, but leaving it in your hands also allows a lot of room for creativity. Um, is it going to be built around a story? Are you going to create a sketch? Or are you going to do a more straightforward PSA, which is equally fine? I mean, some of the most powerful PSAs out there are just ones that deliver information straightforwardly and directly and powerfully. You have a lot of tools at your disposal, so think about that. Quiz question number 3. How will your chosen format appeal to your target audience? Okay. And I want to explain this question a little bit because it might sound confusing. You've chosen a format, okay? So you've decided I'm going to create a short video. I'm going to create a song. Like, how will that format appeal to your audience? And I want you to be specific. I don't want you to just say, well, everybody loves songs. Everybody loves music. I mean, literally, like, what do you think that your format is going to have to do to reach an audience? You may not have all the details worked out. I'm not saying that you have to choose a strategy or a plan and stick to it right now, but I do want you to start thinking about what your format will need to do to successfully reach an audience. So yeah, don't just tell me, oh, everybody loves comics, or I'll throw logos, ethos, and pathos in there. I mean, try to imagine what your project is going to have to do to reach that target audience. Okay, I want you to start thinking about this, so we're not just making things up in week 4. By the way, the great thing is that week 4, like, you have the entire week free. There's one final go-to session, which is pretty light, so it's not a big deal. Typically, it doesn't last too much longer than 30 minutes or so. But other than that, you have the entire week to work on this. Okay, so and that's intentional, that we create that much space for you to work on this stuff. Okay, because I understand it takes time to create a decent professional looking project. Quiz question number 4. Or actually, hold that. Some creative sources that you can use. Compfight.com. Okay, if you need images, listen, I think it's awesome when you can create as much material as you can. Like, I love it when people who are making a film take their own footage. I know we only looked at a couple seconds, but even that sneak peek at that YouTube project, you could see like the guy recorded a short skit and then later he appeared on camera in a more professional way. Uh, that's awesome. You don't have to do that, but it's nice when film people actually go out and shoot their own footage, or they grab their camera and start taking images. But if you do need to rely on some images, either to help out or round things out, Compfight is a great source to use. Donald, I showed question number 3. I can go back to it later if you need me to. Right now, I'm just going to list the sources that you can use. And actually, let's go real quickly to compfight.com. Okay, it's basically a Flickr search tool, but CompFight is like, okay, you should be using two places and really only two places for images. CompFight.com and the AP Images database. Remember in DGL, you had some assignments that required you to go to the Full Sail Library databases, go into the AP Images collection and find pictures. So that's fine, AP Images, or this site here, compfight.com. Because it's a Flickr search tool. But more importantly than that, we can filter out those images that are allowable. So I'm just going to do a quick search for puppies, because who doesn't love puppies? Okay, and I get results. But the important thing is to the left here, when it says type of license, you can click on either Creative Commons or commercial. Technically, we should be clicking on commercial because Full Sail is a for-profit university and it's a little bit too difficult to get into. But if you click on Creative Commons by mistake, that's fine. But these two options will give us only allowable images. So I'll go ahead and click on Creative Commons. And oh, by the way, anything above this dotted line, that's just a plug for a separate site where you'd have to pay for these images. Don't pay for anything. Okay, so everything below the line is allowable to use. So, oh, look at this guy here. I like him. And you'll see this is what we need. Some rights reserved, okay? Any photo that says all rights reserved, we can't use because technically it's fully copyrighted. You should not be using it without permission. This means we can use it. We need to cite it. And in next week's session, because I don't want to overwhelm you, during the week 4 go-to session, I'll cover how we cite images in APA format. But for now, images need to be some rights reserved. So you can use compfight.com to find images to use in your presentation, or the AP Images database, okay? Another cool tool through the Full Sail library databases. Just let me go there very quickly. We're just about done, so hang in there. I should have had this set up in advance. Okay, so I'm going into the Full Sail library databases. I'm going to sign in with my ID. I'm going to sign in again because it always takes 10 logins to get through this. I'm going to go down to the library. I'm going to go to research databases. And after 30 clicks, we'll finally be where we need to be. But for anybody who wants to, and this isn't just for the music people, okay? If you need to add music files or music background to your piece, you have this awesome tool here called Westar, okay? And it gives you the login and password that you'll need. This is awesome because normally these files would cost you anywhere from $15 to $60, but as a Full Sail student, you get them for free. I'm going to go ahead and log in. Okay, so I'm in. And you have all these different categories. They're technically albums, and they're sort of generic. I mean, an actual composer wrote them, but they're generic in the sense that, you know, they tend to have corny titles, like Country, Looking Back, or Rock, Pride of Place, right? So they kind of have those corny album titles. But if you go into one of these albums, you can listen to the tracks, see which one would best fit your piece if you need background music. If you're writing a song, you can also use a song that builds upon one of these pieces. Okay, so these are the sorts of allowable outside materials you can use. And it's really just a matter of choosing what you want, going through the checkout procedure. You won't be charged because you're a Full Sail student. And then I think it gets downloaded as an MP3 file, and then you can incorporate it into whatever project that you're working on. So there's a really cool tool that you should take advantage of. And next week, because again, I don't want to overwhelm people, we're going to actually discuss how we need to cite this stuff. Because believe it or not, we have to cite these tracks. But there's another cool tool you can use. And real quickly, here are a bunch of comic generators. So Pixton, that's a site online that's used. Bitstrips, that's another popular comic generator. Powtoon's sort of different in that it's technically presentation software, kind of like PowerPoint or Keynote, but it's completely different presentation software, right? It looks cool. It looks like animation. So it's probably more of a comic slash animation generator than anything. And then there's GoAnimate.com, which is an animation generator. So you have lots of tools if you want to use. And again, if you're artistically talented and you want to hand draw, that's always cool too. I love seeing hand drawn comics. Okay, but you do have these tools available. Okay, here's the final quiz question, then we'll open things up for questions and answers. What tools and technologies will you use for your final project? And again, you may not know all the details yet, but I want you to be as specific as possible. What tools do you think you're going to use? Okay. Um, and some people are very specific. People who are experts in film will tell me I'm going to use Final Cut Pro, or I'm going to take my iPhone and shoot footage, or I'm going to take my, I don't know, I'm not an expert on cameras, but I'm going to take my such and such camera and go out and shoot and film and blah, blah, blah. Or I'm going to use Microsoft Word to write my script, and then I'm going to use Adobe Photoshop to polish things up. Okay. So tell me what tools and technologies you're going to use for your final project. Again, I want some sense of that you're already brainstorming, that you're already thinking, that you're already anticipating what you're going to need to do for the final project. So you're not just doing it the last second. Okay, now we'll open up things to questions and answers. O'Neill asks, can I put my comic into PowerPoint? Are you hand drawing, or are you saying that you're going to sort of use PowerPoint to... I'm a little bit confused how PowerPoint comes into play here. Because if you're using a comic generator like Pixton or Bitstrips or Powtoon, like the piece will just be created and you just need to provide me with a link that takes me to that comic. Yeah, if you need to copy like Bitstrip into it, that's fine. I just occasionally I get, and you weren't asking this, O'Neill, but occasionally I do get students who say, they pitch an idea and they say, can I create a PowerPoint presentation? And I always say no. Not to be mean, but that's sort of like old school technology. Full Sail students are creative. They're pretty smart. They're technologically savvy in general. They can do more than a PowerPoint presentation. But yeah, if you want to put your Bitstrips comic in PowerPoint, but I don't think you'll need to do that. Bitstrips has a way of where you can just save the file and send me the link, and will take me right to your Bitstrip comic. Michael says, can we submit WVM or WMA files? That's a good question. I think I have a way to listen to those files. We'll get into like what format you'll hand things in next week's session, but most people, when they do finish a project, they'll upload it to something like SoundCloud, right? Or people, when they have their video finished, will upload it to Vimeo or YouTube, and that usually is sort of a workaround. But if I get the raw file, yeah, I think I can figure out a way to play it, even though Mac doesn't typically like Windows media files. Donald asked, if I decided to write a song, can I collaborate with one of my band members on the song? Yes and no. I mean, you should be writing the lyrics. You should be playing a pivotal role in writing the song. If you're doing that, I'm not really going to police you on how much your friend contributed to the music part of it, or what have you. But you should be like there's a director in a film. You should be the main overseer of the project. Okay. Don't bring in your friend who's much better at writing songs than you are to do it for you. By the way, I've had that happen before. Yeah, Donald says I'm not lyrically savvy. Well, I would say too bad. You should be writing the lyrics. Okay, you should be writing that part. Should definitely be you. If you want to get a peer review from a friend who can give some thoughtful suggestions, that's fine. But I did once have a student hand in her comic, and it was drawn by someone else. And I said, well, you didn't make this comic then. You basically hired a friend to draw a comic for you. She said, yeah, but I had the idea. And I was like, okay, that's true, but I don't know. You should be creating as much as you can. That's my message. Other questions that people have? Good questions tonight. Okay, if you don't have any questions and you've gotten the quiz questions down, you're free to go and enjoy your evening. Okay, but I'll hang out here and chat with people or answer the few questions that do come up. So thanks for showing up. Thanks for attending. Have a good night. May, if we're going to draw a comic, we don't necessarily. Yeah, you don't get graded down. You don't have to be a great artist, but I would say again, just follow the rule of you're going to create the best project that you can create. As a matter, like there's, for example, there's a way to create stick figure comics that are highly XK. Like there's this site I'm going to show, XKCD. Do you know about this site? Like, some of them are really, really simple. I'll just click on some random ones to see what comes up. But like they actually have quite a bit of style. Like they're simple, but they're not sloppy. They actually, so I think there's a way where even if you're not artistically great, that you can make the comic look as professional. That you're being careful with lettering, that you're drawing clear panels, that what's happening within the panels is clear. But yeah, I'm certainly not judging based on how good of a drawer you are. Okay, that's not my goal here. But on the other hand, I don't want something that's hastily just scribbled and then you take a picture of it using your phone, your hastily scribbled drawing on a piece of wrinkled paper, and that's your comic. Okay, so again, professionalism. I would say that even if you're not a great artist, I think you can still produce a pretty professional, highly polished comic. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Other questions? I never know if people still hanging out in the room have just fallen asleep, which could never happen during one of my sessions.